Hello, my fellow human light beings. This is Mahadeva, the Thunder Wizard. Welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to jump off the edge of the cliff again. We're going to investigate some of my thoughts surrounding the Annunaki, the Tree of Life, and we're going to discuss alien hybrids, divine kings, and I'll confuse it even further by throwing in maybe some thoughts about Atlantis and antediluvian civilizations. And of course, we can't talk about any of it without talking about extraterrestrials and aliens. By the way, this sale has ended, the 923. You can still go there. There is still a sale going on. But I've raised the price a little bit. It's still, you'll still save, $4,000 or something like that. So if you want to go take advantage of that, you can, but it's not as cheap as it was yesterday. So let's get rid of that. All right. Again, if you're new to this channel is about giving you practical tools. So I'm going to link everything that I'm talking about today, which has to do with the Tree of Life, having to connect with what people call the Christos, the nectar of life that we have within our body. I'm going to be talking about how to have higher dimensional beings, deities, give you initiation, power into these things, so that we're not just talking about mythology or history, we're talking about your personal experience. Because I'm going to relate everything that I'm going to talk to you about these subjects I've got here based on personal experience, not just what I read in a book or what I heard somebody say. And of course, we'll take a look at the history of it all. And hopefully I'm going to clear up a lot of misconceptions, because unfortunately, there's a lot of well-meaning people out there who are getting absolutely, completely wrong. You couldn't be more wrong. The information that is being presented about these important subjects are being completely conflated, made up, distorted. It's awful. So I'm going to try and clear up some of that. So if you're a spiritually minded person, I'm going to keep things focused on actual spiritual experience, and we will also do our best to try and use critical thinking. And when I don't know something, I'll tell you I don't know something. All right? So before we get into it again, what I'm saying here is that I give you practical tools to help you shift. Do you want to be an alien hybrid divine king or queen? Good. I can give you the tools to do that. So the first thing you should do if you're new to the channel is go to the YouTube channel page. And I have playlists on there. The first thing you should be doing is going there and learning the practices that I give for free. The Qigong practices, the meditation. Most importantly, the first thing you should do is go to the guided interdimensional meditation videos and do them. That's the first thing you should do. Then you should be doing one of the energy practices like the Huul breath, Huul, or the Awakening the Immortals. You should be doing that every day. If you're not doing that, I'm here to tell you, you probably won't get much out of this channel. Maybe it'll be interesting, but really what I want to do is inspire you to shift, to change. We are going through a shift. The human species right now, as we speak, is undergoing a massive evolutionary change. We will never be the same. It's going to be at this time. 100 years from now, people will talk about the year 2023 and when human beings changed, when human beings evolved into a different being altogether, spiritually and physically. Now is the time, and the way to be ready for that and to enhance that process is to be doing spiritual, specifically energy practices, which is what we focus on here. So go to the playlists and do the free stuff. If you like the energy that you get from doing the Awakening the Immortals or the Huul breath, then I strongly recommend you go here to thunderwizard.com and subscribe to that. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. There I give you access to the Lightning Qigong, the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. It is the most powerful energy meditation practice in human history. Don't believe me? Give it a try. If you want to see all the stuff you're getting for cheaper here at 923, you go to courses.thunderwizard.com. And of course, I have my books. Most important book is The Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. The other two books that are very important are Extraterrestrials Are Coming to Earth and Interdimensional Revolution, where I tell you about my experiences, having been a contactee of higher dimensional ETs for about a year and a half now, and how that completely changed my life. And you can get those at michaelwilliamdenny.com. Again, it's cheap. I recommend you do it. All right, so back to the subject matter. Anunnaki Tree of Life, alien hybrids or divine kings. We'll see if I can get through all this, but unfortunately we have to wade through a bunch of nonsense. And I'm here to tell you 99.9% of everything you have heard about extraterrestrials, about aliens, and especially, I would say, 100% of everything that you've heard about the Anunnaki having been associated with ETs and aliens is 100% false, except for some key things which have been flipped on its head. For instance, you see here, alien hybrids are divine kings. Now, if I tell you, if I use the phrase alien hybrid, alien human hybrid, if I use that phrase, you have an assumption. You have been programmed how to respond to that. You've been programmed what to believe that is. And I'm here to tell you that what you've been told is actually a distortion. It's an actual concept that has been flipped on its head. In fact, everything having to do with aliens, ETs, has been completely flipped on its head. From the very beginning of people talking about aliens, people never really talked about aliens or thought about aliens until 1960, I believe it was 1961. And that was the the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, which I've proven in this book. I proved to you that that has nothing to do with aliens. That was actually a military abduction scenario. And I prove it to you in that book, Interdimensional Revolution, if you want to find out. But from that, longer than I've been alive. So most of you are younger than me, because I just turned 60. So I can guarantee you that you have been programmed to believe things about aliens that has been fed to you. I will even go so far as to say that everything you've heard about Anunnakis and aliens has been fed to you by the Illuminati themselves. And the reason for that is because if you, for instance, if you can look at this picture and understand what that means, you will never be controlled again. I have to upload, because there's a picture here that I'm going to be using. And so I have to upload it right now, so just give me a second. We're going to be looking at specifically what is the connection between, I hope this is it. Nope, that's not it. It's not that one. It's got to be this one. Yeah, that's it. All right, so we're going to be talking about this in a little bit. And there's some things in here that are incredibly important. So first, let's go over what you know about Anunnakis, aliens, reptilians, alien human hybrids. Here's what you've been told. Now, the sad part about this is that when you go, and if you would just go on YouTube or anywhere, maybe even on Google, and just type in Anunnaki alien, if you were to do that, you will get no shortage of videos, books, articles, and these videos, books, and articles will not reference anything. They will just begin to talk from an authoritative position about, in the beginning, the Sumerians, Anunnakis, aliens. They will just throw this information at you. and they will not use any references. And to make it even worse, the references that they do use, they will attempt to translate Sumerian. I'll give you one example. The word Anunnaki. If you go and just click on any of these videos, unless you specifically seek out some historical, somebody who's a historian or an archaeologist, unless you seek them out, that you're going to get a completely different version from them. But if you just, go under the Anunnaki alien thing, people will tell you without referencing it, without proving it to you, they will tell you that Anunnaki means those who have descended from the sky to earth. And even some of them will then directly link it to the biblical Nephilim, which actually that word does mean descending. And they will say these are, and then of course the connection has been made for you. You've already been primed by the Bible to believe that the Nephilim and Lucifer are beings of light who have fallen to earth and they're evil. So you already are set up now to believe that the Anunnaki are evil. They'll then go in and tell you that the Anunnaki, these actual large, giant, superhuman, super beings, these huge, powerful beings, came in spaceships. I think they say, let me see, they say that they came to Earth 450,000 years ago. And the assumption is this came right out of the Sumerian text. Now, I challenge anybody. I challenge any of you to actually go to, by the way, any of the texts that we talk about aren't Sumerian. They might be written in Sumerian, but the actual Sumerian people disappeared long before these myths were written. They were written by non-Sumerian people who spoke a different language. They actually spoke a Semitic language. We'll get into that. But they wrote it in Sumerian, just like we often write things in Latin. Latin was the lingua franca for Europe, even when people weren't speaking Latin for a long time. But I challenge anybody who believes that the Anunnaki are space aliens who came to Earth 450,000 years ago. I challenge you to find where that is written in any of the Sumerian myths. Please find it. Find it and translate it. And if you can bring that to my attention and you can prove to me you know what you're talking about, I will take my hair off once again to you and I will tell you that I was wrong. You won't find it. But if you click on Anunnaki aliens, you will hear people tell you that this is a fact, that this comes directly from the Sumerian religion, which is completely false. So we need to understand that. Now, does that mean that this is not showing perhaps aliens creating human hybrid kings? Does it mean that? No. So if you're willing to change your definition of what you think alien-human hybrid means and what actually goes on to create an alien-human hybrid, if you're willing to go down that road with me, this might actually be something that will help you evolve. So what I'm going to take a look at here, we've got the tree of life in the center there, which that is fairly well understood that this is a tree and it is obviously associated with something having to do with spiritual awakening. Why? Because above that you have that winged figure, which is obviously something spiritual. Even if you don't, you can look at this and without knowing any of the history or the mythology, you know exactly that has to do with something in the sky because it's winged. And it has to be spiritual. So above the tree of life there is some kind of spiritual representation of some enlightened power. And then you have these four figures You have these two human figures, which are, I don't know what they're doing, pointing at I don't know what the heck they're doing. But they're standing there, these two human figures, and behind the two human figures are seemingly two other human figures, which actually they're not human. You're going to get told, if you look at this, somebody is going to tell you that this is a depiction of Anunnakis. Anunnakis, the deities doing something to these human kings. Okay? All right, so that's what you're going to get told, but anybody looking at that, that's what you can see. I'm going to tell you what I think this really means. In order to do that, however, I first just give me a couple of moments to completely debunk. If you are holding on to the idea that Anunnakis are the mythological creatures from Sumerian mythology, that Sumerian mythology actually tells you that 450,000 years ago, aliens from the planet Nibiru escaped and came to Earth and founded themselves there, and then created human beings in a lab by taking their DNA and the DNA of proto-humans and combining it so that they could create slaves, which is what you are, and that the existing elite are the bloodline of this. If you believe that, first thing I want to ask you is, how do you feel emotionally? When you watch videos about Anunnaki, and people tell you the Anunnaki are blah, 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 human hybrids and slaves, humans are slaves, I want to ask you the feelings that come up in you. I want you to become aware of those feelings. And the reason for that is because in order to look at any of this, if you want to know the truth, you must be willing to accept things that go against your emotional attachments. If you are unwilling to suffer the pain of something coming to your attention that goes against a belief that you have an emotional attachment to, you will never know the truth and you will be manipulated. That's why I'm telling you that this whole Anunnaki thing that's been going on since the 70s, which is when it started, that has, at the very least, it is somebody's complete misunderstanding based on their own ignorance and their own emotional attachments. But I think it's also might actually be a psyop. Because, again, what human beings believe about aliens and extraterrestrials started in the 1960s with the Betty and Barney Hill. It started before that with things like War of the Worlds, but nobody really believed that those things were possible. And then starting around 1960s and 70s, people started believing the possibility that there were extraterrestrial alien creatures that were coming to Earth, abducting people, physically experimenting on them, sexually abusing them, and creating alien human hybrids. And you have been programmed to believe this. And the question is, why? What would these people have to gain by programming you to believe this? Number one, that you are so weak and you are so devalued that your only reason for existing is to be a slave to a more advanced race of beings. Number one, let's just stop there for just a second. If you believe that that the human race was created by extraterrestrials who mixed their DNA with proto-human DNA, specifically so that you could be the slave of these beings, I understand that that's what it feels like to be human, because there's some truth to the generality of that. We are in a matrix in the third dimension, and we are a slave to our reptilian mind and the reptilian minds of others. That is that's a truism. And so your feelings are accurate. So when somebody comes along and tells you, well, yeah, of course you feel that way because aliens came and they mixed their DNA with proto-humans so that you could be smart enough to, talk and take directions, but you're only here to be a slave for them. If you allow that to become true, then you don't realize you are adopting an assumption about you. And if you accept this assumption about you, you will be enslaved and you will never leave the third dimension. That assumption is that the only value that you have is to be objectified and to be used by some other class of beings who are supposedly more evolved than you are. That is an assumption. If you accept that assumption, then anything I say beyond that, as long as I turn you into a slave and a victim, you will accept. It will make you angry. It will make you want to rebel. But if it's true, it means you can never go beyond being a three-dimensional half-ape slave. Is that what you want? If you listen to your heart, does your heart tell you that you can only evolve to simply be half intelligent, half ape? Because that's what you're accepting for yourself. And people conflate all of this. What amazes the hell out of me is that born-again Christians buy into this. And they talk about demons and all of that, and yet they don't accept the idea that they're made in the image of God. And so it's so easy for people to conflate. And when you're conflating because of an emotional attachment, you end up not making any sense. You end up not knowing the truth. You only end up justifying your emotional state of being. So ironically, the people who watch all of this Annunaki stuff thinking that they're waking up and they're going to wake up and they're going to rebel against the dominion of the slave elites, they don't realize that they'll never escape that as long as they believe what they're being fed. And what you have, if it is a psyop, it would be brilliant, because then the elites would simply insert this into public mythology through videos and movies and books. They would just simply have to put it in there, and then you would eat it up because on an emotional level you feel like a trapped slave. Because we do live in a slave culture, without a doubt. You're only as valuable as the banks decide you are, period. If a bank decides that you don't have money, you're homeless. You can't eat, you can't do anything. You can't find shelter. So we definitely live in a slave environment. As long as you accept that assumption, you'll never get beyond it. You think you are, though, because you get all of this emotional rush every time you think about feeling trapped, and then the anger that comes up when you think about those evil, elite, hybrid, reptilian Anunnakis that are doing it to me, and yet you don't realize that just by buying into all of that, you've already told yourself that you don't deserve to evolve beyond it. So if you're willing to accept the idea that you are divine, that you are a light being, and that you deserve freedom, truth, spiritual enlightenment, and you deserve everything any other conscious being in the universe has. If you start from that point, and then we start looking at actual history, not just the modern mythology, but the actual history behind this that is thousands of years old, it creates a completely different picture. All right, so that's where I want you to start from. So let me just dispel the things that are untrue, some of the things that are untrue. By the way, I put a link in the description, not in the chat, but in the description. And the link is simply just a historian that is not coming from a spiritual perspective that does a pretty good job of destroying a lot of the conflations and the generalizations in some of the Anunnaki mythology, and I recommend that you take a look at that. Not because that person has any understanding of spirituality or what I'm going to talk about, but at least you know what's not true. And you have to be able to do that in order to know anything. And if you're able to follow me with this, I'm going to give you the tools and the ability to achieve what people think the Anunnaki are. How would you like that? How would you like to be a being that is so powerful, that is so divine, that you yourself could visualize yourself as an omnipotent deity? Because that is what humans are going towards. That's where evolution is taking us. That is where you are on a spiritual level. Your soul is already there. But imagine being able to change yourself physically, dimensionally, to become that. All right. So this all, the whole Anunnaki alien thing is supposedly based on the idea that the Sumerians came and because they are so old that their mythology tells the truth of the history of the human race, etc., etc. So let's talk about who they were. So the Sumerians emerged in Mesopotamia around 4,500 BC. So that's about 6,500 years ago. That's a long time ago. The first Sumerian city was Uruk, where we get the word Iraq. And Uruk means between two rivers. And I think that's Arabic, for all I know. Actually, forget that. I don't know what I'm talking about. But the term Uruk does mean between two rivers, which is the Greek word Mesopotamia is the same thing. Meso, in between, middle. Potamia, Potamos is river. Potamia means land of the rivers. So Mesopotamia means in between the rivers. Uruk means in between the rivers. The Sumerian language is a dead language. It isn't spoken by anybody. We can read it and understand it, but the only reason we can read it and understand it is because there were tablets in, I believe, Akkadian, which is a Semitic language, and in Sumerian, and they were using the same characters, so they were able to, I believe that's what happened. But that's how we learned how to read Sumerian. But it's a language isolate, which means that Sumerian is not attributed or descended from any language that we're aware of. It's not an Indo-European language, it's not a Semitic language, it's not an Asian language. We don't know where it came from. Now that's not unusual, because even in the Caucasian Mountains, to this day, there's over 100 languages in the Caucasian Mountains, over 100 languages. And many of those languages are language isolates, meaning we don't know where they came from. You can go to places like New Guinea, where you have two tribes that are next to each other, and the only thing separating them is maybe a hill or a mountain range. But their languages will be completely, totally different. So language isolate is nothing new. But Sumerian, what's important, Sumerian is a language isolate. It's not related to any of the other languages that came later in the area. And in other words, it died. Which means that the Sumerian people, whoever they were, actually became interbred with whoever was around them. So the Sumerians themselves, ethnically, linguistically, don't exist anymore. That's important because the person who started this whole Anunnaki alien thing was a guy named Zecharia Sitchin. His last name is spelled Sitchin. Please do me a favor and look him up. Go look him up on Wikipedia. You'll find out even there that he had no idea what he was talking about. But in the 1970s, there wasn't any readily available translations for Sumerian. So in the 1970s, anybody could write a book saying, I've translated Sumerian language, and even if they made it up, nobody would know the difference because they would have no way of checking it unless you happen to be, somebody who was in some university that specialized in Sumerian, which I don't know how many colleges do that. So this guy, Zecharia Sitchin, wrote this book and wrote a few books after it, and he claimed to know that what Sumerian was, and he was translating them. And I'll just give you an example. The name Annunaki. As I said, Annunaki, if you listen to what Zecharia Sitchin says, he translates it to mean those who descended from sky to earth. That sounds a lot like an alien landing a ship, except that that's not what the word means. The word means the children of the sky father and the earth mother. An is right here in this picture. Whoops. Actually, he is in that picture, right in the middle there, above the tree of life, that thing that looks like a bird with wings. That is the god An. He's the sky god. He's the sky father. In fact, the word sky father was used in the Vedic tradition. Dieus Pita, God, sky god, Pita, father, sky father. The word Zeus comes from that same root. The word Jupiter is actually Diupiter, sky god, father. So this is nothing new. An simply was the Sumerian word for sky father. Ki is earth mother and was his wife. So the Annunaki are the children of the sky father and the earth mother. That is why in the Sumerian tradition you get this mixture of the Anunnaki are gods and sometimes they're viewed as humans. What does that tell you? You are Anunnaki. You are the children of the sky god and the earth mother. The Anunnaki is talking about your potential. Has nothing to do with aliens coming to earth. Nothing. So the Sumerians emerged in Mesopotamia around 4500 BC. And as we know, the Ice Age ended around 10,000 years ago. So that is 6,500 years. So what Zecharia Sitchin was saying is that this is the oldest mythology that we have on planet Earth. Then the assumption is that this is the oldest culture on Earth, which is what history and historians were saying. Historians have been saying this for years. We talked about the other day that the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, in fact, do I have that here? The discovery of Göbekli Tepe completely destroyed the historical understanding of human civilization, because those temples go back something like, I don't know, 10 or 12,000 years. I didn't write it down. But goes back thousands of years long before the Sumerian civilization. So what Sitchin is doing is he is saying the Sumerian civilization is the oldest civilization on Earth. In fact, he goes on to say, which is absolutely untrue, it's one of the most ridiculously stupid, idiotic, wrong things anybody could have ever said. He said that the first language on Earth was Sumerian, including it was the antecedent to all of the Asian languages like Chinese, which is absolute, complete, total nonsense. It's just not true. It has no relation to any Asian languages or Chinese. It has no relation to any modern languages. It was a language isolate, and like many language isolates, it was absorbed into other cultures and disappeared. So the assumption that Zecharia Sitchin wants you to believe is that we have to look at even if everything in the Sumerian texts, even if he translated them correctly, even if those texts talked about aliens coming from another planet, you can't say that this is the truth because these are the oldest, things we can find on the planet, because this is the oldest civilization. It's not, by a long shot. They're the first known civilization in Mesopotamia after the flood. after the end of the Ice Age. That you can say. But are there other civilizations that existed before that, even after the flood? The answer is yes. Göbekli Tepe is one of them. Göbekli Tepe was consciously buried, so nobody knew it was there. Whoever did this buried these temples and these monoliths, but they were there long before Sumer ever existed, long before there was the Sumerian culture. So if you're going by this whole Sumerian thing is telling us the truth about our ancestry because it's the oldest civilization, well, that's been shot all to hell. Because there's a misunderstanding even about that. The assumption is, since it's the oldest, it must be true. But even if it were the oldest, you have this problem because we now know, just by looking at things like the Bimini Road, go look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about, all kinds of other offshore things that if you dive down, 300 or 400 feet, you'll see these structures, these megalithic structures that couldn't have been made underwater, which means that they were made during the Ice Age. And we have these myths all over the world of some catastrophe. There's also archaeological evidence of some kind of catastrophe that happened worldwide that ended up creating floods and fires and all kinds of stuff. So we know that something happened to the earth. And if there were a civilization, a very advanced civilization that existed before that cataclysmic event, we would have very little evidence of it. Even our civilization, if something like that were to happen to ours, it would do a pretty good job of wiping us off the face of the earth as well, and anything that was associating us with it. So just from the very start, just the discovery of Göbekli Tepe destroys Zecharia Sitchin's entire understanding about this. All right? So I've talked about it before. The guy had no idea what he was doing. He associated, for instance, Marduk with the planet Nibiru, and he doesn't even acknowledge that Marduk is not a Sumerian god. The Sumerians didn't have Marduk in their pantheon. Marduk came later. Marduk came later in the Akkadian, which again, different language, or the Assyrian. I can't remember which one it was. Marduk wasn't even part of the Annunaki. If he was added later, it was added later. This is what I mean. This is called conflation. He's conflating a bunch of different things together because he has an emotional agenda to tell this story. And my question is, why did he have this emotional agenda? It didn't exist in the mythology itself. You can't read the mythology and come to that conclusion unless you have an agenda to find it in there. So if you want to find it in there, then you can take words out, mispronounce them, take them out of context, like Anunnaki. You can take the definition of Anunnaki, which means the children or the descendants of sky and earth, and you can manipulate that and change it, and you're somewhat in the ballpark if you say it means those that descended from the sky to earth. I mean, that's obvious, right? That's space people. No, that's you're extrapolating. You're making a conclusion. So do you see what I'm saying? And the reason why it's so popular is because of all that I was saying before. People feel trapped. They feel justified in their victimhood. And this is a trap. To feel justified in your victimhood is a trap. And again, the unconscious assumption that you are a limited piece of garbage. Because what this means, if you believe this, I say this about anybody who believes in David Icke stuff, anybody who believes in anything having to do with a false being of light, anybody who believes that you are trapped in the matrix because some higher dimensional being is forcing you to be here so they can feed off of you, what you don't realize is you believe you're a piece of garbage, that you're worthless, that you are an object. And that's going to make you angry. The reason you're so angry is because you actually bought into it. You believe that you're nothing, that you're worthless, that the only value you have is to be used as a slave or as an object for other people's enjoyment, or as some kind of, like an animal for slaughter. If you believe that, you believe you're nothing. It's incredibly important that you accept that. So it's going to be impossible to look at the extraterrestrial question and the history that humans have with extraterrestrials. It's going to be impossible to look at that if your assumption is that you are a piece of garbage. You're an angry piece of garbage, a victim. If you start from a different assumption, if you start from the assumption that I am as powerful and divine and worthy of existence as every other conscious being, including the most advanced extraterrestrials that may exist, and that I am on equal footing with them, and that they see me as an equal to them. If you start from that assumption, everything changes. Then you can take the same material, and even if you impose upon it, you come up with a completely different understanding. I'm going to show you what I mean right now. We're going to take a look at this. I was intrigued by this because, again, what I wanted to do is I wanted to explore and meditate on the idea of what I find very exciting is the idea of Atlantis. The idea of a global, highly advanced human society that underwent a cataclysmic destructive event. And again, if we look at the myth of Atlantis, that's what we hear about. We hear about this highly advanced, technologically, spiritually advanced, intellectually advanced society of humans who became engrossed in their power. They became so engrossed in the power that they were achieving with their spiritual and technological advancement that the universe said, we got to stop this. These people are out of control and now they're causing damage. And so that's the myth is that, heaven wouldn't put up with it anymore, so brought this disastrous flood and sunk Atlantis in a day. How literal that is, I don't know. But there's obviously a an antediluvian, pre-flood society that clearly there was at least multiple highly advanced human societies around the world. What that means, I don't know. As I've said before, I'm absolutely convinced that the pyramids, I can't find my pyramid thing. That the pyramids were in fact built not 4,000 years ago. I believe they were built probably 30,000 years ago. I can't prove that, but that is my belief. It is also my belief that the pyramids weren't tombs, and they weren't even just temples. They were actual buildings that used power from the stars, because the air holes are lined up to specific star alignments, and the Sphinx is lined up with Leo, and other things. And when you get all that alignment together, and you use things like water to come in underneath it, which will create electromagnetic fields. And even today, if you go to the top of the pyramid and you measure it, there's an electromagnetic charge up there that's far more powerful. And this is, it's basically a ruin now. But if that was what I think it is, it wasn't a tomb and it wasn't just a temple. It was actually a piece of technology that was able to pull the conscious energy from these star constellations, combine it with Earth and combine it with the sun and whatever else, and you created, as I've said many times before, created this Earth protection field, which was designed specifically to keep humans conscious, because these people knew that that they were heading towards Kali Yuga, and they were trying to stave it off as long as they could. These are not beings who are slaves. These are not beings who are half monkey, half alien. These are extremely intelligent, very advanced, spiritually powerful beings. And that is who you are. So when we then take a look at this, which, by the way, you've seen this. If you've watched any Ancient Aliens, you've probably seen this picture. I was intrigued because I was looking around wanting to look at the antediluvian society, and then, that's a really interesting topic now, and there's a lot of people making videos about that, and they have more knowledge than I do, including, I forget the guy's name. And so I was watching this video, and there was this guy on there. He was fairly young, but he was talking in these terms of what all this meant. And he was saying that these beings on the far end who are holding those pine cones and are carrying what looks like bags, that these beings were Anunnakis who were empowering the human hybrids in their bloodline so that they would become the elites and rule over the world, and they would enslave the other humans and all of that. And so they were talking about that, and they were making all kinds of assumptions about all of this other stuff, which is why I put the link in there, because you find out what this stuff really is. But there are some things in there that are very, very powerful. The thing that blew my mind is he didn't even talk about the tree of life. That tree in the middle there. So I'm going to tell you what all this stuff means, not from my opinion, not even from a historian, but from my experience. And when you have experience, meaning you have had the experience of working with these beings, when you have been empowered by them, when you have been given spiritual initiation by them, when they have put energy into you, when they have stimulated your kundalini and awakened your pineal gland, when this happens, you see everything differently. And I can look at it doesn't matter, anywhere in the world, I can look at just about any of these mythological pictures and scenes, and I can maybe not every time, but almost every time I can figure out exactly what's going on. And that would have been true with anybody at the time. Anybody at the time would walk up to this and know exactly what it meant, and not because anybody told them, but because they would have had the spiritual experience to understand it. And even if this particular carving was not something everybody understood, it was based on carvings that at some point everybody would have understood, because they would have had the spiritual experience to back it up. So, I'm going to tell you what all this means. So on at the top, that is the Sky Father. He represents the highest spiritual awareness, and he is, as you can see, at the top of the tree of life. What does that tree of life look like? If you said a spinal cord and a bunch of nerves, you're absolutely right. Doesn't matter that could be a palm leaf tree. Doesn't matter what type of tree it is. Trees of life everywhere in every culture represents the spinal column. And here you have the spinal column reaching up towards the crown chakra, where you have direct access to the highest spiritual consciousness, which you can call God, you can call Shiva, you can call An, you can call Sky Father, you can call it whatever you want. But that's what that means. Now, let's take a look at the two people there. So you've got two humans. The way that we know that they're humans is because they have normal hats on. So you see the guys behind them, they have these hats that have those weird markings on them. Those are actually horns. So any of you see a being that has horns, it's not a human. It's something else. So here we have these two beings, which I think are maybe the same guy. I'm not sure. This is a king. Now this is taken from Did I write it down? I didn't write it down. Oh, I didn't have to because I saved a page that told me about it. So I'm going to tell you when and where that picture is that we're looking at. Please tell me that I still have it. No, that's not it. Did I get rid of it? I'm going to be upset if I did. All right. I now don't remember where that is. I didn't write it down. I thought I wrote it down. Anyway, so as I told you before, the Sumerian cities emerged 6,500 years ago. This picture that you're looking at, which has been associated with Sumerian 6,500 years ago, the Sumerians actually never made any pictures like this. This is actually after. This is only like 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. This is Sennacherib, I believe his name was. He isn't even technically anywhere near. For Sennacherib, the Sumerians would have been the ancients. It would have been at least 3,000 or 4,000 years before his time. But some of the imagery still remains. The god An, that still was part of, as you can see, part of the understanding. The tree of life, which is the spinal column, was still part of it. And then you have these beings with horns on their heads, and you have to look at what they're holding. So they are pointing, if you look at it, pointing pine cones at the back of his head. Why the hell would you point a pine cone at the back of somebody's head? What does pine cone sound like? What does pine cone look like? The pineal gland. So why would they point it at the back of his head? Because that's where your pineal gland is. Your pineal gland is right here. You point something at the back of the head. The third eye does it too. If we talk about the third eye, but the third eye is actually projecting from the pineal gland forward. So when we say somebody's third eye is open, what it really means is that their pineal gland is working. We talk about being able to see with your third eye. It means you're being able to see into the other realm. Even though your eyes are closed, your third eye is open. It means your pineal gland is stimulated. So these beings are stimulating the pineal gland of the king. And the king is actually being, his spinal column and the kundalini in his spinal column is being stimulated. And that is giving him access to what? The highest consciousness there is, which is An, Shiva, the Sky Father, Odin, whatever word you want to use. So what this is showing that whoever this person is, at least the idea he wants you to have is that some supernatural beings have the authority to give him the ability to be king not because of his bloodline, but because he has been chosen by An, been chosen by the gods, and you know that because he's been spiritually awakened. Now, this goes against the whole Anunnaki thing, because again, the whole Anunnaki thing is that these interlopers came from Nibiru and they conquered Earth and they created humans and they're these kings and blah blah blah, and they the king bloodline, etc., etc. Except if you're going to connect this to the Sumerians, which again the whole Anunnaki alien thing wants to do, because that's what gives it validity. What the thing that people say, they repeat it all the time. They'll say Sumerian Anunnaki, the Anunnaki alien Sumerian. They have to throw the word Sumer and Sumerian, even if you're talking about something like this, which I believe isn't even, which is Assyrian or Babylonian. It's not even Sumerian. they'll take all this stuff. They'll take Assyrian, Akkadian, Babylonian. They'll mix it all together and they'll call it Sumerian. And they don't even know the difference. And so if you're going to say that the Anunnaki are creating these elite kings to rule the world, and these elites are reptilians who are actually evil aliens from the planet Nibiru, then you don't even understand how the original first Sumerian cities, how they found their kings. Because the kings of Sumer weren't kings. The original rulers of the city-states of Sumer were not kings. They were priests. They didn't make rules. Their only job was to, in the ziggurat, the top of the pyramid of, every single Sumerian city had a pyramid at the center. And the top of those pyramids is where they did all of the spiritual sacrifices and the rituals. And the priests were the beings, the people, the humans that were there who were using the power of the pyramid and using the power of their connection to An, the Sky Father, highest awareness, and they were channeling that energy for the whole city. All of the people in the city were benefiting from their spiritual practices. What you're looking at here is, at the very least, a remembrance of what that is. Those beings that have the horns wrapped around their heads that are pointing the pine cones at the back of the king's head, those are not Anunnaki. Again, anybody who says that doesn't know what they're talking about. Those beings are called Apkallu. And it's an Akkadian word, not a Sumerian word. Again, Akkadians were Semites, related to Arabs and Hebrews, and their language was a Semitic language. It was completely different from Sumerian, and those beings are not Anunnaki. They are Apkallu. And Apkallu weren't gods, and they weren't humans. I want you to listen to me. They weren't gods, and they weren't humans. The Apkallu were wise beings. They were spiritual beings who had the ability to repel evil. They were powerful spiritual guides, spirit guides. What you're looking at here is, if we go back to the original understanding from the Sumerian, even though this had been turned into, why the king is allowed to be king, but if you go back to the original Sumerian, this would be about the priests. The priests were being empowered, their pineal gland was being empowered by these higher dimensional beings that were spirit guides who had the ability to get rid of evil. And in their hands, again, you'll hear the ignorance of the people who talk like this, because they'll say they're handbags. And they'll say something like, in these handbags, the Anunnaki have all this technology. I mean, that's what they say. But those aren't handbags. Those are buckets. And we know that because they're called buckets in Akkadian. And archaeologists have dug up bronze, they're actual buckets. They look exactly like the tin buckets that you can buy at the hardware store. They look exactly like it, except they're made out of bronze. And that's what these guys are carrying. They're carrying buckets filled with water. And what does water do? Water, it cleanses, it sanctifies. It's holy water. That's what you see here. You're not seeing anything having to do with evil aliens coming and giving power to their human hybrid bloodline so that they can take over the world and turn humans into slaves. It doesn't mean any of that. It's hearkening back to a time, I believe, because if you look all over the world, you can find those handbags everywhere. You can find it in South America. You can find it in Göbekli Tepe. You can find people carrying buckets of water. And so this has to be, it doesn't have to be. I'm assuming that it goes to the antediluvian civilization, to Atlantis. And what we're looking at here is what would happen to empower the priest to be able to do his or her job of being at the top of the pyramid or inside the pyramid if you're in Egypt, who's taking all of this energy that's coming from the stars and coming from the alignments and meditating and creating this this protection field around the earth. This is what we're dealing with. So I'm bringing this to your attention because would you like to have that? Would you like to have higher dimensional beings stimulate your pineal gland, protect you from negativity, stimulate your nervous system, your spinal column, your chakras, and your kundalini, so that your crown chakra could have direct access to the highest deity and communicate directly with the highest deity? The same way that you would communicate with your neighbor. Because that's what this is showing. And again, this is, probably, 8 or 10,000 years after the flood event. But this is still being remembered, and it's being remembered all over the world. You see it in multiple cultures all over the world. You can have that if you want it. If you want it, you can have that. The reason why I'm not, a historian will look at this and go, oh yeah, the Sumerians believed in, the Anunnakis were the gods, and there was the Sky Father God, and then there was the Earth Mother, and in some ways, the theology's kind of mixed up. I'm almost quoting verbatim. Some of the theology's mixed up where, it's a Sky Father and an Earth Mother, but in other passages, they're brother and sister, and in other passages, they're man and wife, and in other passages, it's one God. I've talked to that God. I've talked, and I can in meditation go and communicate directly with that God. And have a conversation in the same way that I would have a conversation with you. I couldn't do that before a being that is a higher dimensional being stimulated my pineal gland and turned on the kundalini in my spinal column by literally touching the top of my head. I've talked to you about it. I could feel his finger on the top of my head for a long time. And after that experience, these beings started introducing me in meditation. I could summon them to me and communicate to them. And then they started saying, we want to introduce you to people. And they would take me to, of course, in meditation, not physically, but they would take me to other dimensions and they would introduce me to these non-physical entities that turned out to be deities. And I was blown away that I could have an interaction, a verbal communication with deities I'd only read about. And I met that being. And one day, I don't know who it was, I think it was my guide, which turned out to be the god Thoth. Later I found out it was Thoth, who is the messenger of the gods. And, I showed up meditation one day and I called Thoth and he showed up. And he said, I want to introduce you to somebody. And he took me in meditation through a bunch of, curlicues through different dimensions, and we emerged in this place of light, this blinding white light, and out of it was this light that was this feminine being, and she said, I'm the mother. She said, I'm your mother. And she said, we're the gods that the gods worship. What are the Anunnaki? The Anunnaki are the gods who are the children of An and Ki, the great masculine and the great feminine. I communicated with a being who claimed to be the mother. She was made of pure light, pure love. She then introduced me to her husband, who said he was my father. And he was a dark being filled with a bunch of popping crystal energy, like popcorn, all this electrical energy popping. And then they merged and became one being, just like Shiva Shakti. And then they could, that being would talk to me as both masculine and feminine, and you'd hear this weird masculine feminine voice come at you, or they could split apart and talk to you, one or the other. If you go back and look at the Sumerian mythology, what does it say? This is where the Bible comes from. The Bible talks about the sky separating from the waters separating from themselves. What we're talking about is the first being, the first entity, which you can call God if you want, which is the mother-father being, which is the progenitor of all of the gods, the Anunnaki. So the Anunnaki are not aliens from another planet. Do you understand how incredibly destructive and what an incredible psyop it is for somebody to come and tell you that the Anunnaki are evil beings who are trying to control you and destroy you, when you yourself are an Anunnaki? You yourself are a child of the Great Mother and the Great Father. You yourself are an infinite being. In this picture here, assuming that this king is human, these beings behind him that are giving him spiritual initiation, that are stimulating his pineal gland and turning on his spinal column and his kundalini, would mean that those beings, those kings, those priests, were more evolved than the beings who were empowering them. Do you understand what I'm saying? These beings are here to help you. They see you this way. They may be in a higher dimension. They may have powers beyond ours because we're in the third dimension. But they look at you as a god. They look at you as the son of An and Ki, a daughter of An and Ki. And if you do interdimensional meditation, if you do human-initiated contact with them, they will want to give you this experience where you can verbally communicate directly with the mother, father, deity that created everything. So if you understand that, then you can go and read the actual mythology of the Anunnaki, and you can see it in a completely different understanding. Not listen to the garbage that Zecharia Sitchin throws out there, because it's a complete lie and very possibly is a psyop. If it's not a psyop, it's being used as one. Does that make sense? So if you want to do that, you don't have to do my thing. All you have to do is go on and search CE5 protocols. The letter C, the letter E, the number 5 protocols. It's all over the place. There's people doing it all over the world. If you want my particular version of it, which I call interdimensional meditation, where most people who do CE5 just want to sit in their lawn chair and look up at the sky and see pretty lights, which I got nothing against. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in communicating with those beings. I'm interested in gaining their power, because they're incredibly powerful in comparison to our third dimension. And if you do the interdimensional meditation as I teach, if you have the, if you have the destiny for it, if you have the willingness and the ability, they will take you as far as you can possibly go. But just be aware it will completely destroy your understanding of the third dimension. It will completely, totally obliterate your third dimensional identity. Completely, totally obliterated. I don't have a picture of it here, but there's a picture that comes from a carving in ancient Egypt somewhere. And there's this goddess who is similar to Hela. She's the goddess of the underworld. And it's somebody after death, and he's on his knees, and he's taking a hatchet, and he's plunging it into his head. I mean, you didn't realize that was in ancient Egypt drawings, but he's plunging a hatchet into his head as he's bowing in front of her, and she's standing in front of him. And this is Kali, because she is said to be the goddess of the underworld that devours people's consciousness. Now, if you are a victim and somebody says the Anunnaki wants to devour your consciousness and tell you to put a hatchet into your head, you're going to walk away from that feeling very frightened. If somebody comes to you and shows you the picture of Kali, the goddess, and there's blood coming out of her mouth, and she's got a necklace of severed heads, and somebody says, you see, that's the Anunnaki. They're here to cut your head off, and look at the blood. She's devouring human beings. No. Kali is the goddess of the underworld in the Vedic tradition, the unconscious. And the blood that is coming out of her mouth are all of your character defects that destroy your life. Your fear, your anxiety, your self-hatred, your greed, your lust, all the things that keep you away from your happiness. She eats that. And the heads are the heads of those things. Pride, ego, fear, self-hatred. She cuts off the heads of those, puts it around her neck, and she takes your karma and wears it as a skirt. That's why she has a skirt of severed arms. Because the work that you do, your karma is what you do that creates the negativity in your life. These are the Anunnaki. But if you don't understand how to interpret it, you're going to see it negatively. Imagine if the Vedic religion went dead and all we had were these pictures. Imagine somebody who didn't know who Kali was, and they see this picture of Kali. They're going to go, oh my God, these people were worshiping demons. They must have been evil aliens from the planet Nibiru. People who come up with this have no personal experience with spiritual empowerment. Because the moment that you are empowered and awakened, I can look at any of these pictures and I know exactly what they mean without having to look it up. Because that is the power of this kind of awakening. You can have this. Stop listening to the garbage that's being fed to you. Stop believing every stupid video you see and every book you read, anybody who claims to know what they're talking about. You have to back it up with experience. And if your experience is different than what they're writing about, it means they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And if they're writing and they don't have experience, they automatically don't know what the hell they're talking about. The best they can do, which is what most of the historians and archaeologists do, when they look at this, they can tell you because they've read and translated, and they can tell you what some of this means, but a lot of it they won't know. Like they don't have any clue what the tree of life means. They can tell you what that winged being at the top is. They can tell you that that's On, the sky god, the creator god. They can tell you that because they read it. But they haven't experienced it because they don't believe it's real. They believe it's just the imaginations of this particular culture. And then they can't understand why all of these different cultures, even if they're not connected, they still come up with this same theology. The same mythology starts popping up in every single culture if you know how to translate it. You can have this experience if you want it. But you got to be willing to drop the fear. You got to be willing to drop the victim mentality. And you'll have to forgive me because it's so frustrating for me. And the reason why it's so frustrating and the reason why I'm so harsh sometimes is because I get infuriated that people don't see their own divinity. It infuriates me because I care. I want you to have this experience. I want you to experience yourself as a divine being, as the most beautiful, the most incredible, infinite, omnipotent divine being that has ever existed. I want you to have that experience. And when you walk around spewing this self-destructive garbage that there are evil aliens that came and made me out of the hybridization between an ape and an alien, and all I'm good for is being a slave, it breaks my heart. And the only way I know how to deal with that is that I get frustrated and I get angry and I tell you, grow the fuck up. If you've heard me say that over the years, I apologize, but that's what's behind that. Grow up. Stop being a punished, weak, little, frightened child. Stop it. Embrace who you really are. You are the Anunnaki. You're the most powerful, amazing, beautiful, conscious being that has ever existed. And the fact that you don't know that yet is just a detail. When you're willing, like those guys in the Egyptian carvings where they're taking an axe and plunging it into their skull as they kneel before the goddess of the underworld. They're saying to the goddess, the goddess isn't doing anything. The goddess is just standing there. But she's not stopping him. It's the person is trying to destroy their third dimensional limited understanding. And the way the mythology is, it sounds frightening because it says, you have to go past the goddess of death to be able to go to the realm of the gods. What it means is that you have to get rid of your third dimensional limitation. And the basis for third dimensional limitation is self-deprecation, self-hatred. The belief that you are a tiny little slave, that you are worthless except for what you give to others, which is exactly what we do in our everyday lives because we have this thing called a bank account that says that your value is based on the money. Oh, you don't have any money, which by the way is just a bunch of ones and zeros in a computer bank in some bank. Oh, well then go throw your life away and throw your time and your energy away working for some corporation. And if you spend your whole day selling their garbage to people that don't need it, then we'll give you some of this fake value that you call money, and then you'll be able to eat, and then you'll be able to take care of yourself. You can go on and keep living like a slave. It frustrates the hell out of me that people do that, and it has to stop. It's time for the whole thing to come down. The whole thing has to come down. The entire human understanding as we know it, and the self-imposed negativity and all of the beliefs associated with that. The monotheistic Abrahamic religion, we got to get rid of it. We got to get rid of interpreting everything we see based on that self-hatred. Remember what Jehovah says. He hates you. You're not perfect, so he's going to throw you in hell forever. Unless you suck up to his codependent son who allowed himself to be murdered for your sake. If you allow yourself to be filled with guilt, then maybe he'll let you into his club. And that is exactly what our society is. It is a club of devaluation. You have to devalue yourself to be accepted. Or you can, plunge a figurative, not a real, plunge an axe into your brain and destroy your 3D ego, expand into your Anunnaki self. And then you can have this experience. The servants of the Anunnaki, which are these guys. We call them elves in my ethnic tradition. We called them elves, beings of light. We now know what they are. They are beings of light from higher dimensions that some of them have taken on physical form. But that's not their essence. That's not their identity. Their identity is what you would call an angel, what you would call a spirit guide, what you would call a helper. These beings have no other interest than to bring to you these buckets of sanctified water and bring to you these pine cones which represent opening up your pineal gland so that you can have direct access to the highest essence of who you are, which is the Sky Father. That's all these beings want. And until we as a race of beings on this planet, until we understand that, we're going to continue to destroy ourselves, and we are going to bring upon ourselves an end of the world apocalypse again. We'll have to. This third dimension is going away one way or another. The question is, do we choose to leave it and create another one, or are we going to be wiped out with it and rebuilt from scratch? It's completely up to you. So all of the stuff on this channel is available so that you can accomplish that. All of the links here, but especially just go to the channel, the YouTube Thunder Wizard YouTube channel, and go to the playlists and do the free stuff if nothing else. And if you appreciate me and you appreciate what I'm doing, then do some of these works every day. If you can't support the channel by subscribing, great. Then support this channel. Make me happier by doing the work every day to change yourself. You change yourself, you'll help me evolve as well, and I will appreciate that. All right. So that's it for now. I don't take any questions unless you happen to be subscribed to the Warrior 90-Day Challenge, and I recognize you. Other than that, I will not take your questions, because you should be reading my books, and you should be watching the videos, and you should be doing the work, and after you've done the work for a while, you'll know what kinds of questions I like to answer. What else? Anything else? What else? I'm laughing because I just, I know people are honest about that. How do I get your products without having to pay for it? It's one of the questions here. So somebody's asking about the Celestial Qigong. So you can get the Celestial Qigong by itself if you go to celestialqigong.com. Okay, there's the answer to that question, which you don't realize is really, I'm laughing, but people don't realize how offensive and devaluing their questions are. Anyway, so there's my answer to your question. You go to celestialqigong.com, and that's how you get access to just the Celestial Qigong. What else? Is that it? Okay, that was it. Okay, nothing else. DMT entity, I completely disagree with you. I'm not going to devalue you by telling you why I disagree with you, but just say that your assertion there is based on your self-negativity. Flip it on its head. Take the what you said about the game that we live in and flip it on its head, and you'll be right. What you wrote is the opposite. Meditate on that. Okay, we all done? All right, my friends, thank you so much. I love you all. And I'm feeling that the 23rd, today's the 24th, which is astrologically speaking, whatever the 23rd represents is actually kicking in today. So yesterday was the planets setting themselves up for whatever is happening. It's happening today. I feel different today than I did leading up to this, probably because I was going through my 60th birthday as well as whatever else. I was having a tough time. I felt a lot of psychological and energetic pressure. It felt kind of overwhelming. And then after yesterday, things seemed to have flipped. And I feel a freedom. I don't know what changed. I don't know what transformed. I still don't know what the event is going to be, if there is one. If it's going to be a singular event, I don't know. But I do feel like something changed yesterday. We'll find out. Maybe you feel the same. All right. I love you all. Thank you so much, guys. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you do the work, and I hope you find the experiences that I've had, you find for yourself. And yeah, if the flash don't come and or I don't get beamed up to the Starship Enterprise, I will see you guys all next time. Take care.